Let the public know we're live. All right, everybody, we're going to get started here. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Dunstable Advisory Board here, get things kicked off. So just want to start and say thank you for everyone for showing up tonight to discuss budgetary issues that we have going on. As everyone knows, we struggle with this on an annual basis, and we're just trying to go through everything we can to be able to make sure we're providing the appropriate budget to the townspeople in the best fashion possible. I think we've developed something that's pretty good here, but at the same time, it still requires an override. So with that, we want to just make sure we've crossed all of our T's and dotted all of our I's before we present that forward to the townspeople for vote. So I do want to just say that, obviously we're all coming at this from a position that we believe every person in this room has a right to all the requests that they have made for the financial needs that for each one of your departments. We understand that, but it's kind of one of the things when I talk to anyone that joins the board here, we always talk about having the difficult conversations. And this is probably one of those nights that is a difficult conversation because, who doesn't want to have fully funded departments across the board? And, we struggle with that, obviously, given the fact that our tax base is just on property taxes. So it puts us in a challenging situation. So as we do progress forward, just understand that we're trying to find the right balance to be able to proceed forward. And like I said, wish we had all the money in the world, but we don't. So we have to have a night like this with a little bit of a difficult conversation, but I think some of those have already been had. But at the same time, we want to flush that out. And obviously, we're taping this here for our YouTube channel. So this was going to go out there for anyone who wants to be able to watch that at some point in time. So I don't expect things to get too rowdy, but do watch your P's and Q's. We don't want to get censored off of there. So again, thank you everyone for showing up tonight. We appreciate it. And probably get things kicked off here. Jason.
We've talked about this several times, so I'm not going to go in great detail on everything because we've already done that, but I do have a few slides just to provide an overview and an opening, and then kind of turn it over to the departments here. So real quickly, our overall tax levy is projected to increase by 3.54%. Excluded debt is substantially decreasing. We were initially planning, one thing that's contributed to that, since last time we spoke, we were planning the first PFAS mitigation payment for FY26. It won't be till FY27. So I was able to remove about $60,000 from excluded debt. The overall tax levy, when you incorporate the debt service, the excluded debt service, 2.2. Cherry sheet is based on the governor's number. Now that we have it, that's increasing by 4.8. We usually count on $750,000 of local receipts to balance the budget. This year, I have elevated that number to $800,000. After talking to the town accountant, he's comfortable. I'm comfortable with it. I prefer to keep it at 750, to be honest, but knowing the situation we're in, we have been a little more aggressive with local receipts than we normally are. So total revenue all in, that's including water enterprise, everything is 2.8, and all revenues appropriated is just over 4.5. This is the breakdown of increases by budget category. Overall, this is based on the level service budget of the schools. General government's going up 13.8, public safety just over 3, schools just under 8. That's both regional school districts. Public works 2.5, human services 3, library 3, library and rec 3. Total debt service, as I said, is decreasing, and insurance and assessments are increasing by 10.92. We have, for the first time since I've been here, also appropriated an additional $100,000 of free cash, $50,000 for general stabilization, and $50,000 for the CIP trust that we just created last special town meeting. So those things are new. We've decreased our free cash for operations and capital by $50,000. So we used 358 in last fiscal, we're using about 308 this fiscal. This just runs through some of the major changes. Health insurance rates are going up by 14.13. We worked with Maya to look at some plan design and deductible changes. We just had an insurance advisory committee meeting today, and it's a tough sell to change. The impact on the rates isn't
Not worth it.
it's not worth it, basically. Now, while the rates are increasing by 14.13%, another thing to make sure we understand, I've only increased the health insurance budget by 2%. We generally carry some flexibility within that line item, so we're eating into essentially the flexibility we have. Part of that is we've had an employee drop off, so we're saving some money. So just so everyone understands that, the budget will be okay. It's just not, it's going to be a tighter budget year next year. Pension assessment is a 24% increase. General liability, we're planning for 3.2%. We do not have final numbers, but I've talked to them several times. That's based on those conversations. We've increased both police and fire communications lines. Police by 10,000, fire by 12,000. That again, remember we have we're going to have our first dispatch assessment payment due in 28. And so that's going to be a 50% payment. That's our first payment. So rather than having to come up with the entire amount in 1 year, we're trying to plan for that strategically over the next several years to soften the blow when it comes due. The school district Groton Dunstable assessment, again, is 7.9. The Greater Lowell Tech assessment is almost 11%. Total municipal and debt service is 4.9%, 4.19%, and municipal salaries are just shy of 5%. This is revenue all in for operations. The other thing that's new, we're using $25,000 from overlay surplus, which essentially is a one-time revenue, but it was available and the Board of Assessors agreed to make it surplus for the budget. So that is an additional $25,000 infusion that we normally don't have. And these are operating expenditures plus town capital and then state assessments and overlay. So we have, as you know, we have two scenarios we're running now. One is a level service school budget. In that scenario, we have a $480,000 deficit. There's another scenario where our budget is based on what the town of Groton can afford for their school contribution. In that scenario, they can afford $1.365 million. In that scenario, we are running a deficit just shy of $189,000.
So without an override, that's that amount is what we're yearly behind, right?
That the Groton. Yeah, you could look at it that way. Yeah.
So that would be the difference that we'd have to come up with just to level fund with Groton.
That's really our baseline number. The Groton assessment is the baseline number. We're not going to get any lower than that this year because they've already fully committed that number to the school district. So that 189 is the number we're going to have to come up with if we don't get additional revenues. At minimum. Now, the other scenario, of course, is Groton passes an override and we don't, then we have to come up with that much more. And it also should be noted that between the level service and Groton assessment, if the larger override fails, which my recommended budget is based on, if that fails and we have to meet the Groton assessment, the school district is still in line with having to cut $865,000 in addition to the cuts they made for this fiscal year. So the Groton assessment leaves a substantial gap for the schools to have to cover if that's the budget scenario we're dealing with. This is a breakdown. Can you read that? It's a breakdown of the tax impact on the average single-family tax bill. The level service budget of $480,000. That's $383.80 for the average single-family tax bill, and the Groton assessment match is $150. Now that's only for that override number. That is not all in it. So when we just look at our tax levy increase without an override, just as a matter of course, the 2.5 plus new growth, we're going to see roughly, these are all estimates based on the 25 rate, so take that and keep that in mind. But it's a $205 increase. So when you're looking at the average single family tax bill, you got to take 205 and then add them to the other numbers.
But if you can just as we've kind of talked about already before, and just more for I think a little bit of the education, just to those folks that may be watching versus haven't attended our meetings in the past. So we've talked about this before. So the level service would be to keep things level service with them across all the budgets that we have here, inclusive of the schools. That side of it is we're assuming that Groton is also passing theirs to be able to get to that point. But if they do not pass their override, right, we are still left with a deficit there, as Jason mentioned, of $189,000 plus or minus. If ours fails, or if we wind up in this option A, option B versus whatever, sort of that's been presented to us before. If we had that situation where option A would be to go with level service and option B is to go to the Groton assessment, if we passed just the call it Groton assessment override and Groton passed their override, we could be in a situation where we would have the override of that to fill in that gap of $190,000, and then on top of that having to try to come up with another $300,000 plus or minus to be able to get up to that point. So we'd be in a very difficult position. I think passing an override and then not being able to still not being able to afford the level service budget, I think would be problematic, and then it would be difficult for us to explain. That's continuing why I would say that the level service budget override makes the most sense. But we can get into that later down the road here. But there is that risk that if we just went with the lower number and Groton passed theirs, we'd have to make significant cuts to our budget on top of having an override, which just almost doesn't make sense. We asked for an override, we got the override, and then still had to make, for us, a couple $100,000 worth of cuts is deep. So yeah, go ahead.
And the last thing I'll say is just the other thing to keep in mind is the election schedule and the town meeting schedule get a little wonky because of the budget scenarios we're dealing with. So we don't have a balanced budget in front of us right now. We're just considering two options, both dependent on overrides. And so the way I'm proposing it is we'll go to annual town meeting with two budgets, both dependent on overrides. And at the annual election, which is the week after town meeting, we'll request, this needs select board approval, of course, but the way I'm kind of looking at it is at the annual town election, we'll ask for the level service budget override. If that fails, then we have to go back the next day and call another election for the lower override. Or in the case that Groton passes theirs, maybe ask for the larger number again. But call another election, going for another override on the 10th of June. If that fails, we'd have to call a special election. We'd have to call a special town meeting in June to pass a balanced budget. So there could be a lot of steps to this depending on how town meeting goes, how elections go. So we'll deal with that as we move forward, but that's the timeline and schedule right now.
I also think Groton made it very clear that if we did not come up with the money, that they would explore the super town meeting option.
Someone mentioned that at the last joint
Yeah.
meeting.
I mean, they, two of the members of the selectmen made it pretty clear that that was not something that they would not consider. And more than likely that they would actually.
So you can call departments off and I'll move to the budgets.
All right, sounds good. I think the order we had it in here is almost similar to how you're left to right, so to set up for us here. So I believe the police is the first one on the chopping block here.
This is.
Can answer some questions.
That's your hard to read, isn't it?
You can zoom in. Yeah, there you go.
Is that better? Yeah, all right. Do you want me to kind of walk them through and then you can, what do you want?
Yeah, if you guys have questions about anything else, let me know.
All right, so the police budget is going up overall, 2.6%. You see here the increases. The expenses are the larger part, 6.5, and that's largely based on the communications line that I talked about earlier to help with regional dispatch assessment. Here's the expenses. You see that's the big one. Other supplies is also increasing by $2,000. That's largely based on historic spending. So they requested that based on spending in prior years. The only other thing of note I'll say is that this budget includes the funding of the new police union contract, which we're still waiting to get officially voted on by the select board, but there is funding in there to fund that contract as well. And
You had a position in the negotiations where we're close to being, is this? close
yeah,
to-
no, we're
You're close.
negotiations are wrapped up. We're waiting on the draft.
Okay.
So for each of the departments, I put just a quick overview of some of the major changes and then some issues they're dealing with. Like I said, new union contract communications line, and then the $2,000 in supplies. It should be noted that this budget does not include a 9th officer that they lost last year. It was something that the police chief requested. And I think it's still something that the police department needs, to be honest, but it does
I
not.
agree with you.
Yeah, it doesn't include that. We're also working on, and this goes for fire and police, we have a small working group that I've put together that has been meeting. We've had 3 or 4 meetings now on just public safety facility planning in general. And so, that's more on the capital side, but at some point, we're going to have to address facility issues in for the police and fire department. Police facility is in better shape than the fire facility, but the space requirements and needs of the department, I don't say outgrowing the facility, but kind of outgrowing the facility. So we're gonna have to determine how best to move forward to address everybody's needs. We're working on that now. At some point, that's gonna be a thing that we come to you to talk about. That's kind of the overview I have. I don't know if you want to add anything, Chief.
No, I think Jason hit all the points. Obviously the 9th officer, we'd love to get that back. We lost him a couple years ago now after paying for him to go to the academy, and then he went to Pepple, which was a hit. But it's really important that we get that second late night position back. We still have one guy out there on the road. It hasn't got any safer. We got a casino that just opened up pretty close, and I'm sure at some point that will bring issues. So moving forward, it's gonna be something I probably ask for every year.
What does your call volume look like?
Call numbers, I don't have them, and it's not so much that the late night shift is super busy, but it is when something happens, I only have one guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we do work great with the towns around us, and they're always coming before we even ask, but there's gonna be a time when they're busy, and then our guy who's alone gets a hot call. They don't happen often, but they do, and he's gonna be there by himself for quite a while before somebody else can get there.
And without getting into specifics, it's happened where there's been an emergency
Yeah,
overnight.
we've had medical calls where one officer shows up and has to perform life-saving measures, and unfortunately, things don't always work out when it's only one guy there that can only do it for so long.
Jason.
Mhm.
The dispatch increase on the 10,000 equipment, is that being kind of set aside for this half payment in 28? How is that being,
So it's being budgeted for, now it will be in their budget and the communications line. We're not, you mean like carry?
yeah, is
We're not
it
carrying
being
that.
spent this year? Okay, we're just building that amount up.
We're building that amount. It's not, we're not planning to like encumber it year over year, but it will be built in there, into their budgets. And to be completely transparent, the hope is to be able to address some capital stuff, in the meantime, until we need it for the dispatch. I mean, that's
Okay,
kind of how,
that's for them.
that's kind of how I'm looking at it is,
That's
Trying
where
to take a
money's
few
going
things
this
off the table from down the road.
year. Okay, so use it for a little bit of capital improvements.
I don't know if you folks have other thoughts, but that's kind of how I was looking at it, is we're gonna need 50, it's probably at that point will be between $55,000 and $60,000 in 28, right? I get
Yeah,
28,
what is it now, 102,000?
102, so-
With the proposed 3% increase each year,
exactly.
so.
So we'll be right.
28.
Yeah, do the math.
Yeah, so right around there. And so, and if we have to come up with that all in 1 year, that's, that's
Like
tough.
you said, I'm sort of curious, if it's being held there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
As far as the facility is concerned, Jason just touched on it, I'm just outgrowing it from that perspective.
Yeah, we don't have enough storage, we don't have an adequate facility where we can do any types of training.
Yeah.
We gotta usually branch out to other places, other departments, sometimes we've come to the town hall in the past. So we don't have anything like that, and storage is at a premium in that place, because unfortunately, we have to hold on to a lot of our records for a very long time. And we're just running out of space.
Understood. I just wanted to make sure you couldn't put your hand inside the police office, the police station, like, the fire station.
No, we're addressing the windows here very soon.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're doing the floors, there's a few things.
Floors are done,
Yeah.
it was painted, roof was done when Jimmy Dow was here, he did that maybe 2 or 3 years before he left, so the roof should be good for a while.
That's right, I'm kind of trying to.
You're getting new windows or something, right?
We set aside, was it 20,000 in capital last year, plus the earmark from Rep. Scarsdale, so those have been ordered, and the project should probably be starting in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's all bid, contract signed, we're just waiting for the materials.
Yeah, and they'll be scheduled for delivery on the 14th, I found out this evening.
Oh, good.
So,
Yeah, just trying to balance like the lifetime of the existing structure you have.
Yeah.
versus Whatever.
Yeah, and whatever we decide to do with the public safety building working group, I mean, that's still a good building. I don't think the town, I don't know if they sell it or if they keep it, use it, turn it into something else. I mean, it's still a good building for something regardless.
How long is your contract? The contract you guys are just finishing up,
3
negotiating, 3 years?
Start July 1.
Anybody else have any other questions or concerns or anything there? I think everything makes sense, so obviously that's,
We've kept pretty much every other line item pretty tight, so.
looks good to me. I I agree with you. We should have the ninth officer.
Yeah, and it comes to like, you know, we had an officer, we had the Winterfest out here.
Yeah.
He got hurt. He was out for almost 2 months. And now we're even shorter. We were supposed to have 9, then we had 8, then we're down to 7. You know, there's no flexibility with our personnel. And I've said it before, we have a couple of part-timers, but ever since the initiation of post and the new rules for training and stuff like that, we cannot get new part-timers. There is no rule. We posted maybe a month and a half ago now,
Yeah.
and this is the second posting that we did, and we have 0 applicants.
That doesn't help, so we keep cutting budget. No, I understand. Okay. We don't have anything else? Appreciate the time. Thank you for coming down.
Are all the other shifts good though? I mean, do you have what you need on the other shifts or?
Yeah, I mean, there's always times when you're gonna need extra bodies, but, you know, running the 2 guys on the evening shift right now, and then 3 of the days during the week, I have 2 patrol plus myself on duty. Those are the days I kind of reserve to do admin stuff, go to meetings and stuff like that. And then Thursday and Friday, I'm on patrol with just a patrol.
And when, another reason that it's hard not to have the 9th guy is we were just talking. I
Oh,
think,
yeah,
today.
and, you know, like I said, Nick, or Sergeant Giorgio was injured in an incident, he was out. I also have another member of the department who serves in the military, and he's gonna be leaving for a deployment for 4 weeks. And so that puts us down again. If that was to happen, then I get a guy get hurt, now we're down to 6 guys.
Right.
It's not enough to run a 24-hour operation and provide adequate public safety.
So question, you mentioned surrounding towns coming to help us. Is there also like an agreement where sometimes we have to go help them?
Absolutely.
And then that puts even more risk on
Yes,
town?
correct. There's a time when if Pepperell has a hot call and our guy is in the area, they're gonna call him to go over there, and then that leaves no one for here. And now if we get a call and he's really tied up, now they're calling Tingsboro to come here, or they're calling Groton to come here.
I've heard it before. That also stresses that relationship too. If we're constantly the one calling for help and not being able to provide help, that it does sort of puts a strain on that relationship.
It's called mutual aid, not one-way aid, right?
Yeah.
So, it's supposed to be mutual, yeah.
We're good?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You got it.
All right, so fire. Do you want me to do the same and then okay. So fire salaries are going up 16.5%. That is largely based on your contract with the fire chief. Wages have been reduced slightly. About $7,000. That's basically an overtime line that we've been carrying. We've had the last 2 years, well, last year and then right now in this fiscal, we have some room in our salary line in the fire, the salaries and wages in the wages in the fire department. So you'll see in the wages, I haven't increased those at all. In fact, I've decreased them. The reason is I think we can survive the reduction. And basically that reduction is to help fund the salary line. The other increases are what I already talked about, one, the regional dispatch, and then repair and maintenance, you'll see in the fire and in the highway budget that for heavy machinery, fire trucks, et cetera, the repair bills have skyrocketed through the roof. So we're increasing that line. I don't think as much as he asked, but slightly increasing that. And then the $12,000, that accounts for the increase in his expenses. Here's the salary and wages. And then, so we just went through the changes, but I reduced the overtime line entirely, increased the salary line, essentially level funded full-time salary, and then basically level funded on call, a slight increase. Communications for the dispatch, and then $1,500 for repairs. some ongoing issues that I know of. I'm sure the fire chief knows of more. One is, we've been working on emergency medical, response. It's one of those things that's been on both of our lists since we started. As I think all of you know, ambulance service in an emergency situation, it's a 15 to 20-minute response time right now. And honestly, that's not acceptable. And it's been that way for a little while now. So that is an issue we are actively working on. And I'm hoping to at least be able to, with the fire chief and the police chief, I'm hoping to be able to present at least options that we have. And by the way, all of those options are gonna cost money. So that's another thing. But it's one of those issues that's important enough to really kind of dive in and at least give options for making an improvement in that area. So we've had several meetings about it. I think we're making progress with some of the conversations we're having. So more to come on that, but that is a major issue. Another issue is we don't, as you all know, we've reduced overnight coverage in the police. We have no overnight coverage in fire. So it's completely call. And I know the fire chief has talked about this in the past, that at some point, call volume is going to require different type of coverage overnight. And he can elaborate on that more. And then the facility needs, again, same thing with the police. We're meeting together and trying to develop plans, long-term, short-term, mid-term, long-term plans for public safety facility needs and planning. So that's it. Fire. Good luck.
Yeah, we did. I mean, manpower is a huge problem, especially at night after 4. I mean, even during the day, we do a little bit better during the day. There are some people that work in the area that do come back, but still, I mean, we had 2, good-sized fires this year. And it was, like I always said, it was a struggle for the first 15, 20 minutes until people got there. And then even like we said, you rely on mutual aid. You call 5 towns for mutual aid, thinking you're going to get 30 people. And now, everybody else is having issues too. Or they're out in the ambulance, you end up getting 15. So that's not really sustaining. And then, like I said, after 4 o'clock, there's just nobody. We're down to 3 people in town. I think one's going to be moving away soon. We did a recruitment drive in town, and we got no applications. We got plenty of people from outside of here that want to come and get sponsored so they can go to the academy, but we're not looking to just put people through the academy and then have them, first of all, you have them 6 months it takes them to get through, and you can't use them, and then they come out and they get a job somewhere and they leave. So we tried to, kind of open it up more just to focus on like a town recruitment, and we just didn't get anybody. So the best way I think to do that is going to be to get more, per diem overnight, because once, 4 o'clock hits and the guys go home for the day, we're down to pretty much next to nothing. And it takes just as long for our guys to get here as it does for anyone else to get here at this point. So it's almost even, before you could say like, oh, well, if we can get there before the ambulance, but then after 4 o'clock, we're not. So I mean, it's if that fire at crossing the firehouse had happened at night, it would have been, a complete loss, and there would probably been other buildings that would have been involved.
I gotta say that fire, watching the response was impressive to me. Patrick did a great job coordinating that really, really well. And if you have time to listen to it on YouTube, I highly recommend that you do that, because it really was impressive how well it came together.
We had, like I said before, we had the perfect crew working for the day that could have been working. A lot of experienced people, the 2 that were on. We got notified early, but like it's just an old building, and who knows what was in that building for years. That and it took off, and it's like I've always said, and that's an old it's an old building, but it kind of helped us when we got into the house there, because the construction was so good that we were able to kind of held the building. But if it had been one of the newer buildings, it would have gone much quicker.
if anything, it'd be almost an advertisement for why we need increased financial support for our first responders. Is, you know, the house across the street from the fire department is in half, and they saved it, which is the great part. We have good people here that are able to do the work that we need, but they need that additional financial support to be able to respond to that accordingly. And it's definitely.
It's a very dangerous situation at night for the citizens and for us, the police, everyone. That's all about it. It's not a good situation. But, unless we can get some more, interest in town here, which just doesn't seem to be, we don't have the people in town just aren't, looking to do this kind of work.
We have a little bit of what would be the requirement for somebody in town to be able to do that?
Yeah, you have to go to the academy, and that's, the part, that's what, we had a few people that kind of, were interested and asked, questions. As soon as you tell them, it's 4 months at the academy, 2 nights a week and a weekend day. Immediately it's just, I can't, I don't have time. Right. So I mean, if we don't get anybody that can step up that wants to, and that's only just, that's just the beginning commitment. Once you're in, then we need you to come to these calls at night and on the weekends. And everybody has other stuff going on now. It's not like, back in the day, everyone lived in town, they worked in town, everybody's doing something else. Everyone's got kids play travel sports, people are not around at once, the day ends. So we're gonna have to, the best way probably to do it financially is, more per diems at night, because we don't have to pay the benefits and time and all that stuff. So, but same thing. Firehouse is not in good condition, so you can go work somewhere else in a better firehouse for more money. Everybody's paying more. We were at Five Guys Burgers the other day. It's paying $22 an hour now, and you get a free meal. We're paying 18, and we don't even have a kitchen. So it's talk about recruitment and retention. I don't have much to even flash at somebody to get them to really want to do it.
Obviously, we're a little bit late in the budget cycle for 26, but that wouldn't be, in my mind, something, just a comparative analysis if we could, just to understand what you have that? Okay.
I'll send it to you.
All right. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I think that should be something that we present at town meeting, let them know that the reason why you can't get anybody, the schools, they're nodding their head behind you because the fact they know that they have the aides that are in the room, they just went through the exact same situation where everyone else is paying more. And it does become very challenging when you're right. You walk into Dick's Sporting Goods and they're paying $22 an hour, and
you get a discount.
You're right.
This and that.
Let's see, I can work inside a controlled environment in full t-shirts all day, or I can run into a burning building. Which one am I going to choose? Right?
We offer, the big thing, free training.
Right.
Free training that you have to spend all your time on.
Yeah.
Well, now you put it that way.
But it is real. It's hard to bring people in, and they do look at things in that direction. It's very challenging for the community that we live in to sit there and say, take 4 months off work and go to the academy. It's challenging.
Was it always like that though?
No, I mean, it's gotten, the time that you have to go to the academy has increased over the years.
Because I would love to do it, but
Who wants to spend their day at work and then rush off to the academy 2 nights a week? Now it's the weekend and you gotta go spend all of Saturday, and some of them are Saturday and Sunday. So, I mean.
I'd probably pass out too after like the first hour, but that's a whole different story.
And that's just, we're first responder for the EMS side, so that's a little bit, easier than going sending someone to an EMT school, as EMT basic school is even, more time. So we can get on the EMS side, we can kind of get you up to speed a little bit quicker, but still, fire academy takes you, 4 months to get through. It's too much of a time commitment for people. They just don't want to do it.
The only thing obviously, we know the situation what the facilities are. Are both of your groups funded enough to do the preventive maintenance on the equipment that you need, or do we not have that as well?
This year, we've been doing just fine, and then this year we ran into a bunch of problems early on.
Yeah.
And it's again, a $250 part ends up costing you $4,000 to get put in, because they're labor charges, it's just, just ridiculous, just through the roof. And
Take apart half the engine to fix one part.
yeah, and I mean, the people that we use, we could send it elsewhere and there's really no saving. I mean, we looked around these other places, we could send it other places, but, and you might save maybe a little bit, but the truck might sit there for 2 weeks. Everybody that we use, pump repair company in New Hampshire, it's in Merrimack, they're mobile, they'll come right out. Usually they will fix anything that day, and then anything that's wrong with the trucks, we send over to Tingsboro. So it's right there, and they'd come out on weekends to us, or we brought it to them. So I mean, the little bit you might save, it's not really gonna save you to have a truck sitting in like Methuen or down at one of these other places for 2 weeks sitting out in the weather, that they're gonna get to it when they get to it, because it's not, one of the trucks that they sold us for. So it's the prices have gone up significantly for the maintenance. It's kind of, we got hit, all our preventive maintenance gets done after July. It takes us from like July to October to do it, so by like October already this year, we were like, I can't spend any more money because we've already, we have to do this, we can't, these trucks start to go, it costs so much just to keep them up. If you start letting them go, it's gonna be.
Oh, yeah, you can't do it, yeah, I understand.
And that's actually another big item that I think we have in capital in 29, so is a new truck. Right?
Yep. Yeah, the trucks, they say they should be replaced every 20 years. So we have to, gotta start planning for it now, because we just can't wait till the truck goes out of service permanently with, significant issue, and then have to try to buy, a truck on the fly.
Didn't we get I don't know if were you here when we got the grant last time? For half of the most recent purchase, right? We got.
Engine 1 was purchased on a grant.
Yeah. Just,
I think there was something wrong with the radio or something, right?
then we had to get the radio replaced.
Yeah.
We got the
Squad truck.
truck, and some type of there, yeah.
That we got with the money that we had already appropriated for what they called the rescue at the time.
Yeah, that was a debt exclusion.
Those programs, or I'm assuming we're researching those programs to try to replace whatever we can with the.
Yeah, well, the trucks at this point won't be, we do have a grant in right now for the forestry.
Yeah.
Cause that's old enough, but, like engine 6, we could put in for it, but we're just not gonna,
You're not
it's
there
not
yet.
old enough at this point, but it's, like I said, everybody's supposed to be replacing these, and it can linger probably, a little bit, cause it's still, actually, engine 6 is still in pretty good shape, but, it's just still something we have to,
Plan for,
we have to
absolutely.
get it going. And the same thing with that, the prices, the engine 1, I think they spent, do you remember, Harold, for something? They're $8-9 million now, 800, 900 to $1 million, easy. Everyone's telling us, buy now, get on a contract now so you can get it.
Yeah.
And I say, I wish we could, but we can't. And, so everyone's telling me, if you're still looking for 3 years down the road, plan on $1 million. Unless somebody steps in from the government and can do something about it, it's the prices are just gonna completely insane. And the wait times too, if we order it at 28, they are catching up, because everybody used their COVID money to buy new fire trucks, basically, they used a lot of it, so everybody's prices went way up, and then it's, from the time you order a truck, it's 3 years, basically, before they'll deliver it. They're thinking by the time we are up for it, that should be significantly reduced, but who knows, it still could be, we could order a truck.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying we gotta keep on it, because if we don't order the truck for another 3 years, it could be 6 years before we get it, by the time from today to when we get the truck, could be who knows how long.
Right. I don't really have any issues, any questions or anything? Anybody else? Questions, issues? No? Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the one, highway was next on the list, but I don't see anything here from highway, so.
We just cut it.
Off the ground, boys. No.
Look at that, we got 200 grand, down payment on a fire truck.
Might
There
as
we go.
well skip it for the people who are there. We can come back to it after if we want. So next is the library. Do you want me to just pass this over to you? Did I see something you sent me you want me to pull up?
I couple slides, it's just a slide version of the one pager.
Perfect. Sorry.
I guess I would say from the library side of things, that obviously we're bringing you out here tonight with, I think, just more requested your presence, I think, for more from the side to sort of increase awareness of what you have going on, the programs that are available, how much they are utilized within our community. I think I'm sure you've heard, you know, obviously we look at our budgets here and what we do and what we work with. And this would fall into kind of one of those difficult conversation situations. As I was kind of referencing, if we went with a smaller override and Groton passes theirs and we wind up in that weird spot, you know, as you can look at the rest of our budget, $300,000 basically kind of just wipes out half of what the town does. And we already don't have police at night. We have one police officer at night. The fire department's empty. We're kind of running into the point where we're gonna have to start, you know, cutting away bone because we don't have any more fat or muscle left to be able to trim. So this is one of the reasons that we wanted to be able to do this is that, you know, so like I said, have the public forum that we may not get all the time to be able to discuss what's going on there, because as much as we don't want to have to end the program at the library, that would be the I don't want to say quick fix, because it's not really a quick fix, because it doesn't really fix much of anything. But it would be one of the things that, if you look at our spending, I know Jason had a slide from a year ago, whatever it was, what we spend on the library extends quite a bit more than the other governmental spending that we do have. So it does, it makes for an easy target, I should say. So I do appreciate you coming here tonight, and obviously just looking over the information you have here. I look forward to you going through that and being able to discuss that in a good forum to be able to, for folks to understand what's going on over there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing before, so because of the cuts we made this year to the library, we had to seek a waiver for, to maintain their certification, which we luckily got, but, you know, how often are we gonna be able to get that? I don't know. Amy and Maureen probably have a better idea of that. So, so this increase is based on certification. So it's 2.5% increase over the last 3 years. I think I get that.
Yeah, it's an average.
Okay. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Without getting the waiver, we wouldn't be getting our state funding, which averages about $7,000 a year.
So if you guys could just, I mean, I know who you are, but I don't know if everyone else on the board knows who you are, so I thought maybe you should just introduce yourself.
I'm director of the library.
And I'm Amy Watson. I'm the chair of the board of trustees. Currently, I was appointed into John Callahan's seat in January, which is turning over in May, so up for re-election hopefully. So we just put together some content because, like you said, I think not everyone knows what the library does and how much usage it gets and kind of the return on investment that we have in Dunstable. Sorry, the slide's a little wonky. It didn't translate from Google Slides to PowerPoint, but the thing that jumped out to me when I first joined in January and got to see the annual report from Maureen was the 28% year-over-year increase in circulation transactions, which is pretty amazing. For such a small town, that's about 11 transactions per resident. And then to see there's over 3,000 participants in the children's programming, like we don't have that many children in town. So the fact that, you know, we have repeat attendees and just some really dedicated patrons who are coming back again and again. I'll jump to, I know Can you go to the next slide?
Next slide.
We get into funding. So, Maureen kind of mentioned it, but basically, in order to maintain our state certification, we have to meet what's called the state municipal appropriation requirement, which is known as meeting the MAR. So it's an average of the last 3 years, increased by 2.5%, and that's for us to maintain certification for state aid to public libraries. So we didn't meet it last year. We were able to get a waiver for that. But in order to meet the MAR for this year, we have to sort of meet that 2.5 requirement. This just goes through kind of the return on investment that we get for getting that state certification. So obviously it's over $7,000 in state aid. The big one, I think, on this list is the interlibrary loan privileges. So in 2024, our patrons borrowed over 5,000 items. So that's physical copies that we had sent to our library, and then also digital items that people borrowed through tools like the Libby app. So that is, that's also amazing utilization of the interlibrary loan privileges, especially being a small library where we have a somewhat limited collection. To have access to all those other resources is really important to our patrons. We also lend thousands of materials that go out to other libraries as well, because it's a reciprocal system.
So we pay to be a part of that consortium, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And that's been increased
Okay.
too
Yeah,
this year.
so basically, if we are not part of this, the consortium, and we're not certified, our patrons cannot borrow anything through interlibrary loan. They could, if they tried to go to another library and borrow something, they could be charged a fee. And so they just lose access to a lot of important resources without the state certification. So I think based on what had been proposed in some earlier budgets, this new amount, it's like a $1,500 difference. And so when you think about the return on investment of what you're getting in state aid, the interlibrary loan privileges, the ability to, if we wanted to apply for some additional funding opportunities, it's a really strong return on investment. And I should say we're in the process as well, working on a couple different grants and looking for additional funding opportunities. It's not in the slide, but on the one pager that we handed out, on the back bottom right, where it talks about how does Dunstable compare, I do want to just give us credit because I looked at basically the appropriated municipal income per capita, so what we're spending per citizen. I looked at comparable towns, and so that blue bar is what's appropriated by the municipality. The green bar is additional operating income, so things that those libraries are bringing in through fundraising or donations and their friends groups. Dunstable is really at the bottom of the list for those additional funding opportunities. So as a board of trustees, we know we have our work cut out for us to sort of bring in the additional money. But I was really happy to see that within those comps of Groton, Ashby, Pepperell, Frigate, Tingsboro, Dunstable is investing $59 per capita, or at least this was based on the most recent state data from 2023. And so we were ahead of all the other towns that I compared us to, other than Groton. So I want to give us credit that we're making the investments that we should in the library. We're just asking for a little bit more to get us over the edge to that state certification. And then I'll just make one more little plug. Obviously, I'm new to town. I just moved here in 2023, and I live in a 300-year-old house. I know the importance of having a responsive fire department. But I also, one of the big reasons I moved here with my young family, I have a 2-year-old son and I'm expecting a baby girl, was because, we love the idea of living across the street from the library and being able to walk there. And I think the idea of not a town without library services would be pretty devastating in terms of property values, attracting new people to come live here. I think having a great library is just as important as having a great school system and great public services. So happy to answer any questions about the budget, but that's just
I also want to thank Jason for all the work that he did for the waiver. The waiver was not an easy, it wasn't easy. It's my first year here, and, you know, that was the first thing I got to do,
Yeah,
so.
it's a pain in the neck.
Yeah, it really was. So we
don't wanna
avoid
do
that.
that.
No, we
don't
don't.
go through that again. We want to have all the spaces.
Yeah.
So thank you.
That 7,200, that comes right through, that's Cherry's sheet revenue, just so you know. That's, when you look at the budget, that's part of that number.
So this is great.
Yeah.
You did a great job. The only thing I would probably add, if you were gonna add anything to anything like the Boston Public Library, because we have a library and all that, we were able to actually get a library card from the Boston Public Library, which is huge. Because they have a lot of great events online and stuff like that too, so.
That's great.
In case you couldn't tell, Amy, I think it's like, this is her profession too, right? So she's we're lucky to have an expert as chair on the trustees too, so.
So,
Yeah, but there's no crosswalk from your house to the library. We already discussed that earlier.
I'll be out campaigning for the sidewalk.
There we go.
just with it, just looking at the only question I know that it came to my mind, so I'm assuming it'll probably, when we're looking at that slide of how does Dunstable compare, when we're looking at the appropriated municipal income per capita, is that, you're so 56, 5911 there, like how do we get to that number versus the other towns? Obviously, you know, like I said, we're sort of looking at the amount we're spending, and how do we get to that point where our spending is that much more significant than some of the other communities? Obviously, Groton is a standout there at almost $90 there, but ours at the 59. It looks like we're spending quite a bit more than the other towns, and yet they're still able to, I'm assuming they're able to keep their certification. So how does that work?
So it's partly an economy of scale where a lot of those, some of those towns have larger populations where they're dividing it by, Kingsborough, for example. But part of the MAR is not necessarily based on the per capita spend, it's based on not making disproportionate cuts to the library versus other services in town. And so it's just the requirement that you have to take the average of the 3 prior years' budget, and it has to be a 2.5% increase. And so if all the other departments in town were to get, 3% and the library only got 2, the state would call that out as a disproportionate cut to the library. So it's not about per capita, it's just to be growing at a comparable rate with the other departments.
I definitely agree. Obviously, Drake and Kingsborough are substantially larger, but the Ashby, Pepperell, I think we're, a little bit larger than both of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting, those towns are bringing in revenue from other sources too.
Yeah.
So we know that as a board, we're gonna look for additional opportunities to reinvigorate our friends group, and start applying for more grants too.
We've got some great programs over there. I know when I first moved here, it was in a similar situation with my kids were younger, and that was one of the first things that they got involved with, and I think that was, they have some great programs over there, and I appreciate all that you do. I said the challenging part comes if we don't end up with, these are one of those things that when we put up if we don't pass the override, this will happen. And I know the first 2 speakers this evening will speak to exactly that, that police and fire saw that last year. We said, hey, if we don't pass the override, this is gonna happen. And I don't know whether or not people didn't believe us or not, but obviously cuts were made there. And then very similarly, cuts were also made with the school who's up next. So, but I think whatever we can do to sort of have that explanation out there when it comes to town meeting, obviously once something gets on the ballot, this board and other boards can't really promote anything, but obviously your boards are more than able to do that, or pass out flyers, have these sitting there, just telling people to get out there and vote, to move forward with it. We understand that, it is challenging to tell people to spend more money, but at the same time, when you're getting the benefit that you, potentially, have provided to you by the library services, I think that's one of those things that, we should be promoting. And when we do run our surveys, those are one of the top things is are the public programs that are available to us. So, that's one of the things that the town wants, and we want to keep that there. We're just, we have some large hurdles to jump over here. So, anyone have any other questions? Leo?
There's an annual, I'm gonna call dues for the library consortium, Mary Family Library. Is that just a set fee, or is that based on usage of some sort? Do you know? I'm just curious how their fees.
I believe it varies by population. So ours was 13.5, now it's 14.1.
Okay, so all these towns are paying in proportion to the population?
Yes, I believe they're not all part of the same consortium,
But they're all state certified, yeah. This data came from, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, anything? Good. Appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
thank you.
And on to the star of the show. Oh, yeah.
Jeff Bruno, new superintendent of schools. I'm just going to walk through maybe a few of the slides from our budget certification meeting that was on March 12th, just to kind of give the big picture of where we are. So as you've heard from Jason and some others, the superintendent's proposed budget is really about preventing further reductions in staff, necessary staff. So it's, and actually over the last 2 years have, had to operate with almost 30 positions reduced, so 24 last year. And so this proposed budget actually restores 2 critical positions. The guidance counselor at the middle school that was cut and last year, and as well as the middle school nurse. So there's 2 buildings, north and south. South has been renamed. It's actually the Marion Stoddard building for grades 5 and 6. And then the middle school north, which is 7th and 8th, we had to close that the health clinic in that building. So all 7th and 8th grade students have got to walk over to the south building. And then we have one of our nurses who's sharing time at Florence Roach and at the middle school. So those are the 2 positions that are being restored or proposed to be restored in this budget. And then we're reducing 1 FTE administrative assistant to the central office. So overall, if you move to the next slide, Jason, to hang on to what we have and not have any further reductions in personnel or programming, it's roughly 6.5% increase from fiscal year 25 to 26. And we did have some good news in terms of our operating increase, specifically with our health insurance renewal rate came in under budget, which is a pretty big number when you factor in roughly 153 employees, or FTEs anyway. So if you advance to the next slide.
Is that benefit increase solely based off of the premiums and not based on any contract negotiation?
Yes.
Like with any adjustments with how much the employees have to put in?
So that the reduction, the renewal that came back lowered our overall, but we did have, as part of our unit A teacher negotiation, were able to successfully negotiate a change in that employee contribution versus, so that
But that amount is solely
factors
just a
in.
premium?
Well, that factors into the overall increase of the benefits total, yes.
Okay,
But what we did was, what we typically do is budgeted about a 10% increase. We actually adjusted that to 5. It actually came in at 2%, 2% increase. So that led to a reduction in our overall increase in benefits. But this slide really illustrates that, we're about 80% of our budget is personnel. So between, the wages total and the benefits total, that's the overwhelming majority of our budget. And if you go to the next slide, Jason, this kind of shows the overall FTE analysis of the last couple of years. So in FY 2024, our total FTE across all different kind of employee categories was 377. FY 25 down to 352. And then for FY 26, as I mentioned, we're proposing to restore 2 positions and then reduce 1. So it's a net increase of 1 FTE for FY 26. Revenue assumptions, and we've said this several times, starting, well, not just this year, but last year. I mean, part of the reason why the proposed budget requires an override in both towns in order to fund it is that the flat funding from Chapter 70 that's going back 15, 20 years now of essentially receiving the same amount of money from Chapter 70. So the town assessments, what we put together was these 3 scenarios that Jason was referencing earlier. Passing of the 2 overrides, if there was an override that either failed in Groton or didn't happen, and then Dunstable passing the smaller override, and then the kind of worst case scenario if overrides were to fail in both towns. So we'll share those. And then this slide, I think, really accurately illustrates the impact of being flat funded from our state subsidy in Chapter 70. In 2008, 35% of our operating budget was funded through our Chapter 70 state aid. And if you go to the next slide and go to where we are now, last year that 35% is now 24%. And so the entire difference there that needs to get picked up is from the combined local assessments, which is almost 3/4 of the funding for our budget now. Just some of the ways we've been stretching resources in student services. So I mentioned the nurse and guidance counselor positions. We've also had to reduce positions in special education. You go to the next slide. Curriculum and instruction. So we have our math supervisor, K-8, is now also an interventionist. We've had to find sources of money to fund curriculum leader stipends. And then a lot of our interventionists, and this is definitely happening with our math interventionist at Florence Roach, which now has, over 600 students. They're becoming instructional coaches as well as interventionists because, for Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions, the classroom teachers really need to develop those skills because we can't service all the kids with the cuts and interventionists. This next slide, so the operational efficiency. So we're the independent operational audit that was talked about last year is underway. We're hoping to have some initial draft findings by the end of April this fall. We've also already evaluated our HVAC and building operation systems. We've already reduced an FTE at the central office and admin support. So those are some things that are already kind of underway in terms of trying to operate as efficiently as possible given the cuts that we've gone through the last couple of years. And so the first scenario is this proposed budget, and as I mentioned, it requires the override both in Groton and in Dunstable. If if you want to go to the next slide, Jason. So the number right now in terms of the override amount for the schools in order to meet it is $673,000. In Dunstable, the override to meet the proposed budget is, and these numbers I think may have changed.
Yeah, they've changed.
Since
But it's
we presented.
It's close, but it's changed, yeah.
And Dunstable is 502.
It's 480 now, but yeah.
Yeah, so
That's the total deficit.
that would be the override required in Dunstable. And then, just to be clear, I know last year, I mean, the amounts were much larger. That was a multi-year override. This is a one-year override. And then this budget scenario two, which was referenced, that Jason referenced earlier, this is where there's, Groton can increase their operational assessment by 1.65 million and still be under the levy. And then if that were to happen without an override, in order to match that number, Dunstable would need to pass a smaller override. And so in that case, so in this case, the instant impact of Dunstable would be roughly 185,000 is the override needed to kind of meet that budget scenario too. And that would roughly be, and it'll come up in the next slide, but that's roughly about 875,000 in reductions in that budget scenario.
So again, this number has changed slightly, so it's 180 now, not 185. Same idea.
There you go. It's smaller.
We're moving with exactly.
We're going in
Moving in the right direction.
There we go. 5,000.
That's all right.
And then the third scenario would require more severe reductions in personnel, and this would be no override in either town.
This is based on what Dunstable can afford under our levy.
Yeah.
Which now is not an option because Groton has already committed the 1.365 million. So this is initially what we were running for. If Dunstable doesn't get an override, what can we afford under our levy? But at this point, it's not really a real option, just to clarify,
Right,
make sure
because
we
in the
understand.
situation, as you were kind of referencing earlier, this goes back to the fact that they already have an appropriation
Yes.
that requires the override with us, but they would be able to procure that funding through super town meeting. So this really, no override really isn't an option for us.
Yeah, and so the impact in this is obviously no override in either town. What would that do? And then if you advance to the next slide, again, no override passed. And then it'll give you kind of like these three scenarios again. Superintendent's proposed budget requires the 673,000 override in Groton, 387 in Dunstable. Or sorry, that's five. Should be 500. That's it. 387 is the school portion, right? So, and then the second budget scenario, the reduction in the personnel scenario, we would have to reduce by 875,000. Budget scenario 3, we would have to reduce by about 1.6 million, almost 1.7 million. What would that look like? Again, we're 80% personnel, so the bulk of that reduction in scenario 2 would be people. Roughly 775,000 of that reduction would be a reduction in FTE in different areas. There are a few non-personnel reductions that we're hoping for to meet that number. Just one other thing that was an efficiency thing is we did replace an athletic trainer with EMTs that actually our two of our school nurses are in the process of getting EMT certified. So they'll actually be covering games too, which has its own benefits. They know the kids anyway. So, and that reduces somewhat. You can go to the next slide. And then that third, again, so is just under 1.4 million in personnel reductions to meet that reduction. So it's, and that would be teachers, student support, administrators, it's, both those scenarios would be really, pretty catastrophic. And again, that's for some non-personnel reductions for the worst case scenario for the $1.7 million reduction. And we did have just some, when the numbers shift, particularly in Dunstable, because of the regional agreement where assessments are based on a 5-year projection of enrollment in the district. So the assessments, roughly 77% Groton and 23% Dunstable. That's the breakdown in terms of enrolled students. So because of that, you know, what each town can afford under the levy doesn't necessarily line up with that 5-year average of enrollment. So that's where you get in this situation where Groton can give 1.65 in order to match that assessment relationship or that assessment proportion. Dunstable needs to pass a smaller override. And then some of the changes in what the overall reduction again was based on what Dunstable could afford under the levy or what Dunstable would need in terms of an override. That makes a big difference in terms of any possible reduction scenarios that we're facing. This is just a chart that goes through historically excess and deficiency, how much has been used to help cover basically, you know, being flat funded by the state requires us to use excess and deficiency to avoid further cuts.
So can we go back to that for a second? Just because I'm thinking of the past 4 or 5 years prior to your arrival. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying this to you, but I am.
Okay.
Is that both towns told the school to cut. And the school didn't. They pulled it from this. So last year, they had a big mess on their hands because they needed a huge increase because they hadn't cut the previous years like they were supposed to, like everybody else did. The town did, the schools didn't. So they were asking for a lot of money at once. And I really do believe that's part of why it failed, was because it was too high, you know, it was a lot of money. But if they had cut like they should have along the way, rather than pull the money from different pockets to fund it, we all would have been in a much better position last year than we were. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was surprised that in the end, after a certain number of years, that the school hadn't cut anything. They took the money from other pockets. So now they were looking for even more money each year because all they're doing is delaying the problem for the following year.
Well, and a little bit of what you're talking about, you can see in this chart if you go, because this tracks the use of excess and deficiency all the way back to FY16. And so you have some years where the money in that line has been severely reduced, right? And so you want to keep. I mean, we're in a decent spot now of being at 1.2, 1.4 million, and that, because you know, if you have like a furnace go or something that happens mid-year, you got to keep sending the kids to school, right? So you need obviously money in this account to cover any significant things that go around during the course of the year. So we've built that back up at least to a level that's reasonable, and you can only have so much percentage of your overall budget in that account to begin with. But there were some years there where probably more of that money was used than should have been. Anyway, but the part of the guidance from the school committee too has been able to reduce the use, how much money we use from that account from one year to the next, and that guidance was reduced to roughly 400,000 for this year, FY26. So that's something I think that the school committee is very much aware of. And
one of the slides in our presentation that said you reduce it by another 100,000.
Correct.
For 26. So if you reduce it to 400,000 to 25, is 300,000 in
It was
26.
it was 500, I believe, in 25, so
It's
it's
for this year.
400 for this year.
It's, well, unless the slide's wrong.
No, they're using the certified, so they're using FY 25 certified 400 to balance 26. You know what I mean?
Okay, understand.
Can I just quickly
I thought it meant
respond?
that it was
Yeah.
appropriated during that budget, that's fine.
It
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
it's,
yeah, okay.
I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Jeff said and respond a little bit to that, Matthew. So first of all, I'll just say like, you know, I agree with you, like what you're saying. But so this isn't an excuse or whatever, but it's just sort of an explanation, right? 'Cause, Jeff wasn't there, but, you know, and Christina wasn't there, but I was there for some of those years, not all of them, but I can sort of speak to what some of the thinking was behind that, and this may have been the wrong call, and given what happened last year, I mean, it's easy to make that argument now, right? But coming out of COVID, we had a lot of students who were presenting with all kinds of like new and increased challenges in reading and math, behavioral, all kinds of things. I mean, some of you may remember a couple of years ago when we had the infamous like red shirt meeting where teachers came and they talked about a lot of the behaviors that were coming out of seemingly nowhere, the challenges that they were facing in the classroom. And so I think that part of what we were thinking is, on the one hand, we're sort of seeing the COVID money dry up, but we're not seeing any kind of like remediation in behaviors or in reading and math skills. And so part of what we were thinking was, isn't it better to kind of maintain some of these interventionists now to try to get ahead of some of these challenges and therefore maybe down the road prevent future problems? Like if we cut these support systems out now, is that too early, and is that gonna like then compound these issues and like ultimately be more costly? So I think that was sort of what our thinking was, and I'm not saying it was the right call, but that was, I think, just by way of explanation, what that discussion at the table was all about.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and I respect that. I mean, obviously, you know, it's easy for me to say this now, but I do remember at the time saying to Dr. Chesson,
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you cut it?
Yeah.
And I understand there was a need there, but she also had those temporary funds.
Yeah, they straight up lied to us.
Yeah.
Well, they said that they were gonna, that the reductions in the new people they were hiring were gonna just fill positions of all the people that were gonna retire.
Yeah.
And that never happened.
Yeah.
Like,
They
we
were supposed to be
continued to
temporary
build,
positions.
but the temporary positions became permanent positions and nobody retired.
Yeah.
And here we are. So I think what you're saying is accurate, but it, you know, no, we're expecting all these people to retire and they didn't retire. And we are left with the bill. I understand the thinking behind it, we do, but you would also probably say that, you know, we did say several times, and I know that's why during some of the meetings, it's like, we've got to get ourselves down to 3%. We need to understand how we're going to get to that number.
Yeah.
And we continue to go in with, you know, granted, we're starting off in a much better position right now, you know, in the 6 to 7% range here, but. you
I
know,
will, that
we
is the
14,
smallest
15.
increase I've seen them ask for, so thank you.
But, yeah. It's still,
It's still too high, but
we're still double where we need to be.
Yeah, and, you know, again, the idea, obviously, when you're talking about school funding, is that there should be some degree of proportional share with increases, and that just hasn't happened. And again, we're not alone. I mean, that's 230 some odd districts now in the Commonwealth where are dealing with the held harmless, like you're just getting what you got last year. And unfortunately, that's not how budgets work, certainly in education or anywhere else. I mean, you have to, there has to be a proportional share in that year-to-year increase, and there just hasn't been.
But even with some of those slides that you showed too, is I see you're doing work to kind of continue to you know, measure what you're spending and make cuts accordingly, which is great to see, because I feel like there seems to be some sort of an effort to look at the cost and try to get some control around some of them with you know, with reductions. So I appreciate that as well.
I guess is Is there a way to 3%?
I mean, if, again,
The way to 3% is additional revenue from the state.
the
That's
proportional
the way-
share,
But that is, like,
I know what you're saying.
it's in, without reductions, there is no way to achieve 3%. It's not possible. It's math. It's just not possible without some intervention from the state. I mean, even as I'm looking at their E&D use, I mean, their ARC of E&D use is not all that different than our ARC and free cash use. Our free cash was at its peak and right around the same time, and now we're kind of trying to trend the right direction, moving off of that. And it looks like they're trying to do that too. And,
yeah, and
you know,
it creates this kind of false gap, right? Because you're looking at like an increase on the assessment of, 7, 8, 9% in Groton and Dunstable, because, this is a perfect example of it. We got 6.5% increase. Assessment's gonna go up higher because the state increase is probably 1.5%, right?
and
Proportional share.
I think you're right, they probably could have made cuts in using ARPA for year-over-year expenses. It's not a good practice, obviously, because it's a one-time funding infusion. I would also say that I think they probably made up for that this fiscal year, unfortunately, because they have made some pretty dramatic reductions impacting a whole lot of stuff that's happening right now in the schools. So,
Yeah, I think with the 24 positions cut, I think the operational increase last year was just under 1%, 0.9.
but I mean, I will say one of our legislators' office called me today asking, they have a meeting, they have a meeting coming up with the Chair Ways and Means, and they asked me what our budget priorities were. And I think he knew what I was going to say, but we did have a long conversation about Chapter 70. I think it is in people's mind. What happens as a result of that, I don't know, but it's not lost on the State House at this point that Chapter 70 is a massive problem. I think, and it's getting more and more attention. So it's not going to get attention probably this budget year, but out years possibly.
I guess, again, I take nothing away from any, I'm on a lot of these different ones where I know we're working towards something. It is very challenging to say, so even next year, if we went down to 3%, the reduction of the utilization of E&D is going to take, if you took 3%, now it's probably 4 and change, right, of the markup there. So that's assuming we only increased by that 3%, which doesn't appear possible. We're in a very, as we look at our budgets of the school, is a big portion of that, or the big portion of your budgets is the teacher salary. So there's going to be a very challenging situation for us to be able to all to get to a number where we're going to have enough. We're not going to have to come to the towns on an annual basis to ask for additional money. I'm struggling, and I think I was kind of talking about it before the meeting started. We have to try to find a way to find something that the towns are going to agree to on a regular basis, because this is a regular basis problem. And I don't know how we're going to get there because it just appears we have a large hurdle to jump over, and then to have to do it year over year is going to be challenging. Groton's in a much better position than we are, because as I was sort of saying with talking about the library, as we've trimmed the fat, we've trimmed the muscle, we're down to bone, and us not making an override puts us in a very difficult situation, not dissimilar from last year. And I would say that we got relief, but then anybody who's a parent on this board or in watching this here knows that you didn't get relief. You're kids' education took a hit in order to be able to get that relief on your tax side of things. And then at the same time, as we're talking with the chiefs earlier here, you've also put yourself in a situation where you're less safe on a regular basis. So we've got to find a way to be able to fund it. And it just, I have very low hopes for our state representatives to come through with something that is going to do something for us. I know they're working towards it. I know they say they're listening, but I'm sure there's another hot button priority that they're gonna come up with. They found $1 billion last year, but all of the school districts, they probably could have covered all of their shortfalls with that swipe of a pen, but they went, they chose to spend it elsewhere. And we're in a very difficult situation, and we've gone to them, and I appreciate both your board, Lacey and Jason, writing these letters to the state to try to find some spot to get some increase, gaining traction. That's great. I just realistically, I know how slow the state moves, and we could be 3 more years of this. This is kind of the reason that this board, as well as the rest of the select board, went for the multi-year override with the hopes that we could make enough noise to be able to do enough to get something done by the time that we were looking for another increase. And I think it's either, Jason and I have talked about this several times, where do we just become a town that, hey, we need an override on an annual basis. And if you don't want to agree to that, then there's some great real estate agents around. It's a very challenging situation, right? If we don't get an override, we're not going to be able to continue to fund anything that everyone likes about this town. And it's a very difficult way to look at it. And it's the challenging part of our board here is to try to figure out where those cuts are going to come from. And there are a lot of things that we don't want to see cut and trimmed back on. Obviously, our community, public safety, our school system, all things that I believe are critical fabrics to any community. And if we can't fund those, we're stuck, right?
So prior to last year, though, we've been very lucky in the sense that since 2008, any override we've needed for the schools, especially, we've passed. Groton hasn't. And because of that, we were able to avoid having another override for like 5 years because we passed the override, Groton didn't. So we were ready to fund them at the full level. Groton didn't, so they kind of saved us in a way where we didn't need another override because we were able to sit on that money for a few years and spread it out. And last year was the first time it failed.
And this year we're in a situation if we don't have an override, Groton doesn't need one to be able to fund more than we can. And it puts us in that situation. Scenario 3 is not even real. It's not a real thing. Because they can just give them 1.3 million, and that puts us in the spot where we owe walking out the door.
Groton's been clear, they're not giving less than that. That's what they do.
And
so so in addition to the 1 million they're giving them, we also have to make up for the 600,000, right?
No, that's all baked in. It's all baked in.
that was for, and the 600,000 of additional money, at least understanding, was spent on one-time issues.
Yeah.
So that.
It is. But part of why Groton can afford more than us right now is because they raised that amount last year.